this is the bit where we get to assemble the Avengers and get a panel up here. So I'd like to call 4 people up. First of all, please, can we hear it for Deborah Cornwall, who's the head of marketing procurement at EE and has been for 4 years. Prior to that, she was 6 years at Tesco, where she was also head of marketing procurement. Come on in, take your pick. Oh, come up now anyway. Sorry. That's Chris Hurst. Yes. Hi. Who is CEO of Havas Europe from September 2015. At the moment, he's CEO of Grey London. And Chris established the agency as one of the UK's most dynamic, sought-after and creatively awarded, securing clients including News UK, Vodafone, Volvo, HSBC, McVitie's, GSK and General Mills. He's currently one of BBC's Robert Peston's Speakers for Schools and a regular commentator in the national press, including BBC, my own paper, the FT, and Sky News. And he's also the chair of the IPA Value of Creativity Award group and a member of the IPA Council, member of the Advisory Award for the Creative Industries Foundation. And can we also have, please, Amanda Rendell? Thank you. Amanda is Global Head of Marketing for Commercial Banking and Global Banking and Markets at HSBC and leads marketing strategy, consumer experience, insights, proposition development and marketing communications activity across over 50 countries and territories. She's had 20 years of client and agency experience, beginning at Barclays and ending up and moving through an enormous list, which I won't actually give you at this point. She's on the Commercial Development Board for London Symphony Orchestra, a Fellow of the Marketing Society, a member of the Qualifications Advisory Board for the Institute of Direct and Digital Marketing, and most recently appointed as an observer at the board of the Royal Mint. And could we also please have Professor Hertz back up as well? Come on in. Thank you. Okay, so I think the first thing we really want to tackle is this bizarre figure that's being chucked around, which is it takes 3 years to actually achieve anything, and the average cycle is 2.7 years. Now, as a procurement person, perhaps you can start by telling us why is the cycle that fast?
Well, first of all, I think it's been an incredibly interesting morning, and the reality is for us as advertisers, the finance cycle is still a reality. So the reporting structure is still very much there. Most of us have 5-year plans, but we have shareholders that we have to report to. So I'm afraid that is the brutal truth for the vast majority of advertisers. And it's a case of building up relationships with the CPOs and the CFOs. So I think one thing that I wanted to say to people this morning, and Mark's presentation and Les's have backed this up, that it's really key that you do expand relationships outside the marketing department. But things just take time. It just takes time to build the relationships with the right people within the organisation.
Okay. Amanda?
I think financial organisations, they are so concentrated on that short term, and they are actually. So because that's how they manage. You do have 5-year plans, but the marketing function has to work to a year plan. They have to go through an annual operating plan. And unfortunately, if you hit margin pressures, the marketing function is the area where they're going to come to. And they're going to say, well, let's take a bit off. So never have had the need for us to demonstrate that link to the commercial aspects. It's greater now than it ever was. So for my team, and I do B2B marketing, which is always really tough, even though there are people at the end of it. To actually demonstrate that if I do activity A, it will lead to B, is an incredibly hard thing to do. So we actually do need lots of very, very clever people sitting in our team talking about that and actually working with the finance function, working with procurement, sitting in the business. It's absolutely crucial.
So does this talk to your point, Marina, about making those teams more diverse?
Partly. I mean, I think, incumbents and big players who have kind of all the legacy issues, including long-term planning cycles, are increasingly going to be at a disadvantage in a world in which newcomers are arriving who aren't locked into the old ways of doing business and are able to be faster, more agile, more flexible. And I appreciate that for people who are, working with companies who are tied into these cycles. You have to work out how to navigate that terrain. But for you guys, I'm sure it can be frustrating in a world as fast-moving as this to be locked into them.
But that's why you have to demonstrate really quickly what you're doing. So with my team, just sort of saying, trying new things and going to the business and showing them is critical. And it really is. We've got such a big role to play now. I think more than ever as change agents. I think you're absolutely right. What you were talking about earlier.
Because coming to Amanda's point, a lot of CFOs see marketing as discretionary spend. So when OpEx is under challenge, the tap gets turned off.
Yeah.
So everything that we've just heard about econometrics is absolutely key to demonstrate the value and the long-term planning, the importance.
Makes it less of a leap of faith, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely. But to feel comfortable and be familiar with your with the finance people client side, don't just support the marketing function. Expand your horizons.
So, Chris, from your side, what changes are being made to try and force an extension of this relationship? How to make it longer?
The client-agency relationship? Well, I mean, I looked at those. I'm always a bit cynical and sceptical when people stand up and say, here's a fact. Relationships now last 2.7 years or whatever it was. I mean, I've never heard that before. And I don't know where, and to be honest, I don't know where that's come from. So I have a little question mark about that in my mind to start with. I think that certainly in the businesses that I've worked in most recently, that would not be reflective of our business. So we had a far long relationship, and that's not just because we were great. I think that lots of agencies would probably say that. I think that there's two parts in my mind. I think that some of the things that agencies were always great at, which is building long, enduring client relationships, is something that the good agencies are good at, and that's part of their business model. I mean, that's what they do. I think, having said that, what we've heard today is there are lots of other types of consultants entering the marketplace that is changing that dynamic. But of course, ultimately, I mean, some things change, but some things stay the same. The way you retain a relationship with your client is you generate value for that client. I mean, that is just still true. And even if that client asks themselves a question more frequently than they used to, well, do I need to go and talk to somebody else? As long as you're able to demonstrate to that client that you are adding real value to their business, which I thought Les's presentation was fantastic. One of the things so I chair the effectiveness committee for the IPA, and something that probably should have struck me more forcefully previously, but has certainly struck me forcefully since, is that the industry, I think, massively underplays and underinvests in the area of effectiveness. And ultimately, the only reason that we exist is to drive sales and profit for our clients. And therefore, our first, our middle, and our end questions should be, are we doing that? And demonstrating really tangibly to our clients that we do that. There's still only a relatively small number of agencies enter the IPA Effectiveness Awards, for example. It's not all about winning awards, but those are things that drive an effectiveness culture through an agency. And creativity is a means to an end. Sometimes I think the industry talks about creativity as an end in itself, and it isn't. It's a means to an end to drive profit and sales to our clients. And if you're doing that, then frankly, you're pretty unlucky to lose the client. Honestly, I mean, it does happen, but you've got more chance of keeping them if you are.
Okay. So, how do you think you can balance the procurement's cost-driven need and the agency's value-driven one?
Again, I think it comes back to everything we've said about ROI and everything Chris has just said about demonstrating how you can make an impact on the business and essentially share the spoils, share the benefit of that, be transparent about how you operate, and be involved as early on in the process as possible. Make sure you have a seat at the table. I mean, I don't know in this room how many people actually get to see their clients' CEOs on a regular basis. It's been that trusted partner. Most procurement people ultimately report into finance. So again, this is why I keep banging on about the finance point and making sure that you are comfortable about having those conversations, thinking about the ROI, and being able to demonstrate the effectiveness of the work that you're doing.
How do other industries, particularly creative industries, handle this? Is this industry unique, or
What the?
this? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Tim. I was reflecting on this morning, and I think the challenge that we've all got collectively in this room is a lot of CFOs and CPOs remember what this industry was like 20, 30 years ago. So they might have been quite junior in the organisation. There was a lot more money sloshing around. And I think the other reality is, and I'm probably going to get shot for saying this, but when we see group agency results coming out, double-digit growth figures, and we as advertisers are 5-6% in many cases, then that obviously causes a bit of a discussion in many boardrooms. So yes, it's a...
You make too much money.
Well, I just think it's the elephant in the room, and I just think it's a conversation that everybody just needs to face into, and it's not... I knew it wasn't going to be a popular comment, but I just think it's the reality, and if you really want to look inwardly and say, you know, what are the potential barriers to us growing our business within certain client bases, that's just a fact. I just think everybody just needs to...
I think it's an interesting point because I think there is a continued debate in the industry about whether we're paid enough by our clients. Of course, you know, clients think they pay too much, and agencies don't think they get paid enough. You know, surprise, surprise. But I do think some of the things the industry doesn't help itself in that regard. I mean, I do have a particular bugbear about the industry's approach to awards, for example. And I think that awards should be, they're not important, but I think you can send the wrong impressions to clients. And that's why I think, without going on about it too much, that's why I think effectiveness is such a key measure. We can award ourselves as many things for the pretty pictures we do as we want. That's up to us. But ultimately, we need to, I think, change the emphasis a little bit in our industry about actually, do you know what, we are serious business partners for our clients. And actually what we do deliver, what creativity can deliver, is creativity can deliver almost uniquely quick results for a client if you get it right. I mean, actually, it doesn't take 3 years. I mean, your graph, your Adam and Eve graph, I mean, it didn't take 3 years before things started happening. It happens really quickly. But that's putting that into the context of delivering real profit and change for a client via our creativity rather than just talking about the pretty pictures, I think.
But it has to be about partnership. I mean, and you know, I think a really, really effective agency-client relationship is where you're both striving towards the same goal and you both are partners in that together. And I think you're right, they do have to get in front of the CEO because it has to be something that you all own. And if that doesn't happen and you don't achieve that with your agency, then you haven't got a good agency, in my view. So, and also that agency should be there bringing you all the insight and ideas that your own structure can't deliver. That's what they're there for. They're actually there to be that partner. So if they can't do that, they're not adding any value to your relationship, in which case then you need to look for another agency.
And coming back to your original point as to how this industry is different from others, I think for me it comes back to that, you know, the essential question, what price creativity? And it's that magic ingredient that's contained within this room. That's the bit that's really hard to define to the board. But that's what, coming back to Chris's point about effectiveness, that's what we need to think about collectively.
And do we think that agencies could better communicate the value proposition?
Yes.
Yeah, without question.
And how?
Without question. Well, I would like some suggestions on this. I mean, Liz and I on the effectiveness committee. I mean, one of the key things the IPA want to do is answer exactly that question. How do we do a better job of raising discussion awareness within the client community of the industry's genuine, not just that some campaigns work, I think clients know that, but it's actually there are learnings and replicable learnings that you can take, and actually, it's not just sort of some work and some don't. There's really, you can actually create planned effective campaigns, but I think that's something that we've done a good job of talking to ourselves in the industry about, and less good job talking.
Can I ask something, because I don't know that much about the advertising industry, but do you do projects often for clients where you don't charge any fees? And I'm asking this because I had a really interesting conversation with one of the senior people at McKinsey the other day, and he said that their business model has radically changed in the last few years, and they are now taking on a lot of clients, no fee, but there is a uptick. They get a share in the return, and they say we can demonstrate that we are really going to. I'm sorry if I'm like throwing this out there, but you said from other industries. And I think, it's fascinating that they've made this kind of very bold move to say, actually, we think we're amazing, we think we can add real value, so it's to do the effectiveness. And, don't take it on trust. We'll do this project for you, and then we're going to get a percentage of the
Well, I get
uptake.
probably
I don't know if that's common.
Well, no, it is. I get all the management consultancies coming to me telling me they can
And
do
in
that.
advertising.
But they come to me and tell me they can do it in advertising, and they will do it for nothing.
Oh, in advertising.
Yeah, so they're crossing this.
So
I
they're
see.
crossing the boundaries. That's why it's so
Interesting.
So hence, I think, which is why I think advertising agencies, marketing agencies, have got to think about their model. They've got to look at the customer, look at the trends, look at where technology is going, and start to think about their business model. Media agencies, don't get me started.
I like this is back to your Zanuck point, really, because the whole idea of having a couple of points off the back end, that's great. It's very movie world.
And that's the question, do agencies do that? I think agencies would love to think that they can do that. In only my experience, I think that is, I'm sure there will be examples of where that's happened, but it would be vanishingly small in the greater scheme of things at the moment in terms of the industry.
But don't you want to have that same level of gravitas and ear of the board?
Yeah,
Because
yes.
management consultants just automatically walk in, their very brand names just, the door just opens for them, and they get a hearing.
And I can give an example. 2 weeks ago, KPMG led a digital innovation workshop with my board, and I'm going, really? Which is great. Sorry.
on our space. I mean, it's
No, I agree. I mean, I'm agreeing with you. I think it's a key. I think it's a key challenge for the industry as to how it maintains or retrieves or rediscovers its position at that table. My personal view on why I think that's difficult is, or why the industry struggles at the moment, is because at its heart it has this word creativity. And I think that creativity is a very difficult, intangible subject. It's just something that there are some people with sort of, beards and like to hang out at Shoreditch House who suddenly just come up with, it's compare the meerkat. What? And an algorithm can't do that. Yeah. But the problem is, I think, that to an extent the research industry has told clients a bit that you can actually numeralise. You could turn creativity into numbers, and you could put it on a grid and a graph, and you can make it safe. But it's just not true. But I think there's something about what we do which has creativity at its heart, which is fundamentally different to what KPMGs and whatever do, that somehow make us hard to understand or believe, or
I mean,
I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't have an answer. Wish I did.
But as a client, that's why I'd much prefer it came out of my advertising agencies rather than a management consultant, because I think I think the people that work in this industry are far more intuitive about the customer and about where the world's going. So why can you not evolve those models to help us get there? Coming back to the emotional side of the business. Otherwise, we go back into...
But what could your advertising agency do? They're here today. Hi, Grace.
They know. I talk to them continually.
They sound like they're on rocky ground.
No, not at all. No, not at all.
What could they have done to be the people that were doing that workshop with the board? I mean, what? Not just them, but for all of us.
No, but for all of it. I think it's about that. You know stuff. You know so much stuff that doesn't always filter through to the client. Actually, it's amazing what you know in this business, and it's about how do you package that and take that and bring it to the client to actually add useful insight, which they're not getting. Because I have to get my team go out and find stuff out, whereas I know I've got a whole bunch of people sitting. In my agency, in particular in Hatton Garden, that know stuff that they just need to tell me, and they do tell me. But I would like that to become. I would love that to become more ingrained, if you like, within the actual business. That so my CEO does know that that's where he's going to get that insight from, rather than thinking I need to go to a traditional KPMG or someone like that to get it. I mean, because the KPMGs of this world do not have that emotional connection to the customer. They don't. They are in rational territory. So, and that's where I worry that, because we go down the rational route, not the emotional route, we don't combine.
Okay, so I'm conscious we've got some good brains on the stage here. So I'd like to try and get some questions from the audience. If you can stick your hand up if you have a question, we'll try and get a mic to you. Do we have some out there? Yep. Great. So, gentleman here. Thank you.
Hi, Nick Ford from WPP. Question for Norina, and it goes back to your rather disturbing commentary about Gen K and how they don't like to pay for music. Sometimes feels to some of us as though our clients are getting their buying habits from Gen K. And I wonder whether you have any thoughts for us on, from your benefit, experience in the music industry, of how we can do a better job of monetizing what we do commercially. It goes back to this question of new commercial models and actually how we can somehow capture the value of what we do in our pricing models. And it's kind of the holy grail in our business, much talked about, very seldom seen.
Well, in music, the challenge has been that if you can remember that not too long ago you'd go and you'd buy a physical CD and that would cost £10. And now if you think about the margin you were making on an album as a record, as a music conglomerate, compared to now where you're making this tiny 0.0 p on a download or on a stream, we've had to be thinking a lot about where is the money going. And in music, increasingly, as in publishing, the product is actually becoming an advertising tool for the artists to go and do concerts, be stars of your campaigns. For writers, they're making a much greater income stream, top writers, from their speaking engagements than they're going to make from the actual book, even if you're selling your book for a lot of money. So the record industry kind of realised this at some point, and they tried to lock people into what were called 360 deals, which was essentially we would get a stake in all of your business, including your touring and things like that. But artists didn't really like it because they didn't feel that actually the labels were very good at delivering all these other things. They thought the labels were good at helping them get a piece of music out there, but not very good at helping them on these other things. So in any industry, I would say, which is moving at a very fast pace and is being really disrupted, the challenge for everyone, and whether it's advertising or consulting or energy or banking, is where is the money now? And it's hard to know where it's going. So one of the things we're doing at Warner Music Group is we're making a lot of investments. We're making a lot of strategic partnerships. We've invested in SoundCloud. We've invested in Spotify. We're buying small companies, and we're placing a lot of bets, as WPP obviously is doing as well, because nobody really knows what's going to land. So if you have, and it's not only money, because it's also securing the right relationships at this point where you can, lock in favourable terms with good people. So I don't think there is a kind of simple answer. And even though the music industry was really the canary in the mine, but I think one of the things that it's doing, that we're doing at Warner Music really well now, is I think being really innovative in terms of the relationships and investments and acquisitions we're making. And so I think that helps. But
some more questions? A gentleman at the back there. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Dan Shute. I run a small agency called Creature of London. We're about a 4-year-old startup. It was interesting sort of 5 minutes or so ago when I think 2 conversations about how advertising agencies can get back on the top table and consultancies working for free or in exchange for points after a long time kind of became conflated. As a startup, we really struggled with 90-day payment terms when it came to surviving. The idea of working for free is lovely. The idea of working for points is lovely, but it does mean that you have to have money to pay your people for a very, very long time at the beginning. which not a lot of startups have. It's one of the wonderful things about this industry, and one of the wonderful things about the kind of old-fashioned remuneration system that we constantly kick in these meetings is that it does allow you to kind of start a business with very little money in the bank, which is, I think, quite a good thing. I mean, you know, I have a slightly selfish point of view on that, but I do think, to Chris's point about creativity, cutting out the people that haven't already made a huge ton of money seems like a bit of a shame and a bit sort of self-defeating. Just curious as to whether the panel have any ideas on a future model that might not rely on having 500 grand in the bank before you set up a company.
I can tell you what I think.
I probably wouldn't share it if I did.
I mean, maybe the challenge for you is about, you know, is there a way you can collaborate with others? I mean, I think collaborate, for me, that would be one of the simplest things to do to try and get into some of these bigger organisations. If you've got something that's amazing, completely differentiated, new way of doing things, but it sometimes can be difficult to get into those organisations. And the procurement will tell you that.
I was going to say, and I remember Dan from last year, so hi, hi Dan. But big organisations, the payment terms, the contracts, you know, all the structure that goes with that obviously doesn't lend itself easily to your kind of business. So I suppose my advice would be is start with small clients, and come back to, you know, the project fee conversations, but just be really clear what your USP is and what your the value you're adding to the business. And I know we keep repeating it and, you know, banging the same drum, but that really, really is key. But in terms of upfront payments and, you know, supporting new startup businesses, yeah, you big guys are not the best place to start, to be really, really honest.
I think go on.
Just a sort of a self-protectionist point, because, you know, we're 4 years old. We're okay now. We're at the point where we are taking points in things and we're setting up our own stuff. I think it's more a model that actively kind of denies the big companies access to these small, smart, interesting, the people who are brave enough to take a risk, the people who are brave enough to go, you know what, fuck it, we can do this, and we have ideas, and we can make a difference. It seems slightly, well, self-defeating for the big companies to go, yeah, but, you know, doesn't work for us, so we don't want your thinking. And I think that's because this isn't me going, it's really hard for us, because it was, and we're still here, and, you know, that was brilliant, and it was an incredible learning experience for us. It's more, it feels like a shame to be sort of sitting there going, yeah, but if you can't pay for yourself for 6 months, then we're not interested in your thinking.
I think the interesting analogy I would use is if you look at fintech businesses now and in the financial organisations, go back, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, no one was really looking at them. Now, you know, banks can't get enough of them. And then actually a lot of what's happened is you've got people like Accenture who are sponsoring these programs which now the banks are you know, aligning to. And all the good thinking is coming out of those fintech organisations. Now, quite a lot of them won't succeed, but a lot of them will. What's the, if you like, advertising marketing equivalent of that maybe, you know, could be an idea to think about?
The tricky thing there is, one alternative is you do go down that merit road and you get into a VC-backed model.
I know, which is
But then
hard,
everything we've talked about this morning is all
Yeah.
about not being short-term, because, you know, there's no more short-termist point of view than the VC model, and that's not good for us or you.
I think there's a broader point in that as well, which is certainly something that I think all agencies struggle with, which is at various points we've talked about different types of business models, and I think whether you're a startup business or an established business, even an established advertising agency or creative business isn't a very big business, and because you know 60% of our costs are our staff always. I think that we are on this very difficult to get off conveyor belt around on the fee model. We need money coming in every month, which I think makes it very difficult in practice to shift to other you know, so agencies love talking about IP and you know well, if we could come up with this fabulous thing and then we'll get the money back in 3 years' time. But the problem is, what do you do in the intervening 3 years to try and get the money back? Well, do you know what? You just got to have some fee-paying clients. And I think that's certainly something where we've, in the agencies I've ever worked in, ultimately it's been very practical problems like that stopped us really doing a good job of really innovating our business model, if you see what I mean. And I haven't come up with the answers yet. Somebody's got me. I'll, you know, happy to listen. Steal them.
I just wondered, Dan, about cloud sourcing, organisations like Zupa is something that I know several big organisations or big advertisers have looked at. So maybe, I appreciate you weren't a one-man band when you started, but if there are sort of, one or two startup, very, very small startups, something like that might be a good first rung of the ladder.
Okay,
Sorry, there isn't an easy answer. There isn't a...
need to move things on slightly. We are quite pressed for time. I've got a couple more questions. Okay. Yeah, sorry, one here.
Sorry, I was very interested in Amanda's point about fintech. I was at the Cannes Innovation thing, like a number of people I imagine were. But people talk about creativity, but they don't talk of it like innovation. And the funding of innovation is pretty sophisticated in pretty much all the businesses I know. I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with 3M, and we all know their story. Google's story is 20%. Most marketing management consultants will talk about the 5% or 10% that should be budgeted to innovation, but we don't talk about it like that. We talk about it almost like a tax on the business, which I can cut when the business can't afford the tax. And I don't know whether there's some part of the conversation that needs to readdress our relationship as an industry with innovation. Many people say agencies are the most conservative businesses you can imagine. Amanda's point about insight and innovation and what's coming, and Generation K is all about innovation, not about creativity. So I just think there's an interesting thing there.
But you see, I think innovation and creativity are intrinsically linked.
Definitely.
So if you don't put those two together, and actually we don't start thinking about that, we've got a real problem coming. And I think we've got a real problem coming with where we're going to get our people from, by the way, which is, I think is the next thing that will hit. Because, we're going to need far more technologists, and we're going to need far more people that are going to be innovators, but we also still need them to be creative. So I think as an industry, we've got to think about that and how we're going to bring that together. So, why not? Why could we not do our own equivalent of fintech within this world? To me, it makes sense.
Okay, one more question here. Thank you.
I want to kind of push a question back to the client side, really. I've ex-client, most of my career client, and agency side 7 years. And when I came agency side, I did believe that agencies needed to speak the language of numbers much more than they had been. And I think we're getting better. There's still progress to be made. But just like clients have a portfolio of products, I think agencies need a portfolio too. And we had, as Chris said, some success of being able to sell on value on some occasions, and to sell on value very successfully, albeit the biggest challenge was to follow that model in year 2, because we found that clients actually really struggled with the variability of it, because if we were to max out in your Accenture model and suddenly get paid 4 times what we may have otherwise normally had been paid, because something was hugely successful, drove the sales, so it drove the return, but our ability to repeat it the following year was almost impossible. And now I understand why, because clients want predictability. So I think we and clients are as complicit in the whole remuneration model as each other, and we need marketing and maybe the finance function to help us plan for a different model. Because I agree, I think some of marketing's R&D. So how do we put a bit of it aside to manage a different environment? It needs the client to help come to the table too.
But I think it's also part of being clear about what that business strategy is and where you fit within that strategy. So you're right, sometimes it can be short-termism that creeps in, but if you've got a really clear strategy and the agency is partnering with you on that, then you shouldn't have those issues at year 2, 3, because it should be part of an ongoing programme of how you work. So I'm quite sure that John Lewis did not have this thing where they were debating every year whether or not they were going to pay Adam and Eve. No. I'm absolutely convinced that would not have happened.
They just understood.
They just understood how it worked. Yeah. So, and I think that's, but it's being very clear. No, I completely get what you said. But I think you've got to have that agency relationship right in at the beginning. When you're having those discussions about next year's budget and where we're going to go on that vision and strategy, they've got to be there. And I think in so many big organisations, they're not at the moment, because they're not. Whereas the KPMGs of this world are sitting at the table. So how do you evolve some of our business models to be there?
But the finance guys need to be there.
And the finance guys need
to be there day one.
Yeah.
And for you to say, well, what happens if this is 100% more successful than we anticipate?
Yeah, I completely
Guys,
agree.
are you going to pay out? You really almost need to be that bold up front and just see what reaction you get.
And then the challenge, of course, with all the focus on the metrics, and I'm an economist, so I'm happy with numbers, but all the focus on the metrics, the earlier point of how do you reconcile that with the longer term value that we've talked about in the earlier presentations that really matters. And so, short measuring for your quarterly reports or whenever you have to do is going to show you a response in a short period of time.
But it's getting those right KPIs.
So it's also about having long-term metrics built in.
It is,
and it's really important.
And the business will always look to the, what are the numbers where we are at the moment. So, and it's marketing's job, and they are working in partnership with their agencies to actually put those KPIs into those boards to actually start to change how they think about it. So it's my job to do that. I've got to be I have to drive those metrics into the business to get them to care about the things that will drive that long-term piece.
Okay, we could keep going, but Professor Hertz has indicated that we will all be making very bad decisions if we don't have something to eat and drink possibly in the next 10 minutes.